So I want to start off by saying just a real heartfelt thank you, guys. I got a lot of good feedback on the first episode. A lot of people seem to actually really listen and like what I had to say. And um, I actually had some people say, like, I wonder who he was talking about. You'll never know. I didn't want to, like, call anybody out on this. It was just, like I said, I wasn't holding grudges, but I did get some good feedback on like that it actually sounded good and everybody actually cared about what I had to say. I was just surprised, and everybody said that they loved it. So I also had people say that it sounded like I've been doing this for years, but that was my very first try. So I'm going to keep going with this. I really like it. I really think it's awesome. It's fun. It's fun bringing up the stories and maybe telling stories that people just might not have known about me. Of course, that's not all I'm going to do is just talk about me. I know I'm fucking awesome, but I can only talk about myself so much. I just have so many things that I've gone through in life, so many things that I can talk about just personally, things that I've done, things that have happened to me, and things that I've gone through. So I will have tons of stories about my life, but I'm not going to just make this about me. That being said, today's episode is about me. As some of you know, I celebrated my 5 year sober anniversary. Was the beginning of September. 5 years sober from alcohol. I still do meth. I don't really like my teeth. So I just smoke a little meth here and there, maybe some crack. But alcohol, I'm sober from. It's 5 year sobriety, man. It's crazy. Like, I didn't think I'd make it that far. And a lot of you may not know how bad I got. But today I wanted to tell that story of how I got there, right? So basically, I had my first beer probably at like 2 years old, honestly. Like, my dad drank. He wasn't an alcoholic. I mean, he can say he was an alcoholic because he drank a lot of beer, but his thing was he would drink a beer and then he'd set it down, come back to it, and it would be warm. So he'd grab another cold beer. He only wanted to drink it when it was like prime temperature, right? Now, I don't know how he was when I was younger. I do remember, hey, little Rich, get me a beer, that kind of stuff. I remember those things. I remember always going to get my dad a beer. And so I don't know if he was an alcoholic back then. I'm not going to talk about that. I I just remember how he was later when I was like a teenager. But I remember him always having Budweiser was his thing. The Budweiser, red and white can. That was my dad's beer. And every time I see, a 12 pack of Budweiser, that's what I think of. I think of my dad. I wasn't a big fan of Budweiser when I was drinking. It wasn't really my thing. I would drink it if it was there, but it wasn't my beer. But when I did have a Budweiser, it's all I thought about was my dad. Now, there was times where my dad, I remember one time he had like the can, the white can that just said beer. And I think that's the funniest shit ever, just beer. Um, so those were the rough times, I guess. I also remember he drank a beer called Lucky. I want to say it was like Lucky Lager. It had the caps that had like little pictures and symbols. You had to figure out like what the phrase was under the cap. So he would give me the caps, and I would figure out what the phrase was. Like, I remember those. But that was my first experience with like knowing what alcohol was. And I'd always take sips of my dad's Budweiser and be like, "Oh, that was my first beer drinking experience." I was raised around beer. I knew what it was. My dad drank. I was a good kid. I was all the way up until, like I said in my last episode, all the way up until maybe, I want to say 10th grade, something like that. I straight A's and never did anything wrong. And I was like the perfect kid, right? Right, Mom? Then, when everything started changing, I remember going to like house parties out in Lake LA, or I think we went to one, in Little Rock. And I remember they had keg beer. Like, I had never had keg beer. I always had it from a can. And so I had a cup of keg beer, and I remember tasting it, and I was like, "Oh, this tastes like shit," and I didn't like it at all. And I remember pouring it out into a bush. So I was like, I was just like, "Oh, I'm gonna fill this up again." And I remember guys saying, "Hey, you're empty. You need to refill." Hell yeah, dude, fill me up. And I'd pour it out into the bush and pretend I was wasted, and it tasted like shit. I was like, "Why do people drink this stuff?" But that was like one of my first party experiences. Then I do remember eventually drinking it and catching a buzz and partying with people. And I remember this one party, this guy was mixing, he was mixing drinks, and I asked the guy, like, what are these drinks called? And he said, I call it a motherfucker. And I was like, okay, why do you call it a motherfucker? He's like, you'll see. And so he makes me one, and I'm like drinking it, and it tastes delicious, right? Turns out it's just like a bunch of different alcohols with like a little bit of orange juice, but it tasted so good. You could taste the alcohol, like I take a drink of it, and I get that little alcohol shake, kind of like when you pee, guys, and you get that little shake, get that little alcohol shake once you take that first sip. But it was it was good, and I remember finishing the first one and feeling a little buzzed, feeling fine. And then I got to the second one, and I was like starting to feel it, and I was like, motherfucker. And the guy walks by. See, told you. That's why I call it a motherfucker. That shit comes up on you real quick. I remember when he was making the second one, he's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, man. Oh, dude. So I ended up, for some reason, I remember there was like a bed in the garage. For some reason, I remember like laying down on that bed, and the room started spinning, and that was the first time I ever felt that. And I was like, holy shit. And I just puked all over the bed. And then my friends found me, and they took me to the car, and driving home, and we're driving around the lake, the lake bed. I just remember puking out the window and puking all over my friend's VW Bug, and he was pissed. You know who you are if you're listening, if you ever listen to this. But dude, it was like a really bad experience. I was hungover, and I remember just hating it and being like, no, I'm never doing this again. Oh, and I did it again. And I was going out partying. That's where it all started. Just like partying, going to little house parties and out in Lake LA when I was in high school. And it continued that way. And then I moved in with my dad, and beer was kind of readily available. I was able just to drink whenever I wanted. He actually started just buying me my own beers. He would get pissed off when me and my friends would drink all his beer, so then he would just buy an extra 12 pack, and um, he wouldn't care. And um, me and my friends would party in the bedroom. We'd jam out in the bedroom, and band practice and stuff while he slept. And he was cool as shit. He didn't really care. I'm sure he complained about it, but he never complained to me. We actually put carpet on the walls to try to deaden the sound, and I don't think it worked. But he never complained. I guess he really liked the fact that I was doing that and having a good time. And so me and my buddies would do that, and then eventually he moved me out to the backyard, and he got me a silver Twinkie, or one of those Airstreams. Like I had one of those. I just called it my silver Twinkie, and didn't do much partying in that thing because wasn't a lot of room. But me and my buddies would hang out there, and we'd drink and party, smoke weed, stuff like that, and we'd have parties like outside, just hanging out, outside of the silver Twinkie. And then we eventually upgraded a couple times and ended up with the single wide mobile home where we had all those epic I don't like using the word epic, but it just sounds good, like the epic trailer parties that we used to have, the backyard trailer trash parties, we used to call them. And those are some good times. Those are some really good times. This was before I was even 21. And my dad used to take us on beer runs. We'd get a list and money from everybody. My dad would take us up to the store to buy stuff, to buy all the beer and alcohol and stuff, and the Boone's Farm that all the ladies liked. And I think we were drinking like Natty Ice at the time. It was pretty crazy. Like it was gross. Or we drink like Mickey's 40s. I remember getting a bunch of Mickey's 40s for everybody, and yeah, it was that's what we were drinking at the time. But it was just a party and stuff, and then I was 20, and that's when I had my first kid. That's when June, my oldest, was born. It was like she was born in April, and I turned 21 that August. So, but at the time, I wasn't ready to be a father. I know we're really never ready for that, no matter what age when we have our first kids. But it's like I was all I was doing was partying. Like I really wasn't ready to have a kid. I really I really showed that. I just kind of hung out. I remember my dad saying like, "Hey, how's your kid?" And I was like, "I don't know. I haven't seen her in a few days." And like, "What do you mean you haven't seen her in a few days?" And all I wanted to do was party. I'm not proud of that at all, and I'm not saying it like, oh yeah, I'm really kind of ashamed that I did that. That's how I was. But I was, I was young, and I was still a kid in my head. All I wanted to do was party and play music. Like that's all I cared about. And something ended up snapping after a few months, and I ended up going all the time. Which still I was going all the time, and then a couple days a week I wouldn't go, and I just hang out with my friends and party. My nights off that I was working overnight at that time. I was in graveyards, and I my nights off I would party with my friends. So partying really kept going, and um, even though I had a kid, and then we ended up from there, from the trailer trash parties, we moved to and this is eventual. I think it was a little while. We went through a few houses. I think I moved to Palmdale for a little bit, but then we got the houses on Ronar, and that's where the parties just became insane. Right? They were they were crazy. We were always partying, and then the second house on Ronar, it was just like nonstop. That's all we did, like all the time. I was going and seeing my kid during the day, and then coming back, and usually just playing cards with my brother and a couple of buddies. We played dominoes, stuff like that. Like that's pretty much what I was doing all the time. But and then we'd have band practice a couple days a week. So that's those are the days where I'd kind of stay home, and then I'd practice with the band all day, and I'd stay home and do that. But like it was always a party, right? It was I think I can count during that time. I can count on one hand how many days um, I didn't drink. I was drinking every single day, and it just kind of got out of control. And then I had another kid, and that's my son, and then the pressure was kind of really on to kind of cut it out. Right? It was time to kind of make a change. Now I had two kids, and most of my friends didn't have any kids, and so they didn't understand. None of them had any kids, so it was just like I had two now, and I was like, man, I can't be doing this anymore, and I wanted to, so I kept going, and I kept going with the band, and I kept trying everything I could just to keep the partying going. But um, I was getting a lot of pressure from baby mama one, and uh, it was justified pressure. I needed to do something with my life and take care of my kids, and I felt like I was doing okay because I was going there during the day, and then I'd come home and party. And so I don't know. It wasn't right. I really wasn't doing anything with my life. I was kind of wasting away working at the dairy for $7 an hour. Um, but I was there with my kids, so I thought I was doing okay. Everything kind of came to a head, and that's another story that I think will be told with a few of my guests that I'll have on. So I'll save that for another time. But eventually, um, under the pressure, I had to crack, and I quit the band and ended up leaving the house and moving back in with my dad for a little bit. It was supposed to be like a month or two, ended up being like a year and a half because I was just trying to fix things. I ended up trying to go to school, and I quit the dairy, and I was trying to go to school, try to do something, and I wasn't really working. My dad was giving me money to go buy alcohol. I remember he'd give me like $5, and I'd go and buy like four Bud Ice tall cans because that would get me drunk. Um, so I remember they were like $1.25 like out the door. So anyway, that's what we would drink. We'd go hang out here or there, and when I wasn't going and hanging out with friends, I would just like steal my dad's beers, and I just remember like always like every day just drinking, and I'd go and see my kids, and then I'd come back, and I'm still like doing nothing with my life, and uh, eventually, I didn't do anything with the school I went to, and eventually I got a job at Walmart, and I was just like, okay, I'm not making. I think I was making like 7.25 or something like that. It wasn't anything, but I was making some money, and I had a little bit of income, and then baby mama one had just got a pretty decent job, and so we had some money. The money we were making together, we could afford our own place. So then we decided that, hey, let's get married, because she wouldn't live with me unless we got married. So I was just like, okay, well, I guess we'll get married then. And I really didn't want to, but I was just like, I need to straighten up, and I need to take care of my family and do all this stuff. So I figured it would help me, get sober and cut the horse shit, and so that's why I did it. And it was just like, and I don't think she was in love with me. It was just kind of like we had kids together, so we just kind of decided to do it. Um, and moved into Palmdale. We got our own place in Palmdale, stuff like that. Things were kind of looking up, and but I was still sneaking alcohol. Still sneaking beers. I I'd have beers in the fridge that would just sit there, and and then I'd grab beers on my way home from work. And then I'd drink. I'd pour them in a cup and just drink them, while I was watching the kids, and then I would throw the cans into the dumpster across the street. So she never really knew. She'd always see the same beers in the fridge, so she never really knew. That was a trick I learned and used later, which I will explain. Um, and the only time we would uh, get really, I'd actually get drunk and party with my friends is we would go bowling. And we had, the bowling alley in Palmdale had a night of where it was like, I think it was like dollar beers or something, like really cheap beers and like $4 pitchers. And they had these like plastic cups you can get for $1, right? Something like that. But it was like $4 pitchers. So we just fill up you would get a bunch of pitchers and just fill them up. Uh, and then like the bowling was pretty cheap, so we'd play a few games, and everybody would show up, and we did that for a few years, and it was super fun, right? We actually got really good at bowling. We actually got into a league, and we had our own team, and we were called the tall cans because that's what we liked to drink was the 24-ounce cans of beer. So we were called the tall cans. And I don't know if everybody remembers our tall cans shirts. We had our numbers and our name on the back, and that was our bowling team. And we would go to like, what was it called? We go play pool at this place in Lancaster. We had fun there, and um, that was always fun. I remember there was a band playing one night, and I was fucking wasted, and it was like a cover band, and they were playing. They were good, and they were playing a bunch of covers, and I just kept like over in the corner, just kept yelling like, "Play Freebird! Come on, play Freebird!" And I'm just yelling at him. Like the dude was getting so like so fucking pissed at me. But like, I have a few friends that still remember that shit, right? Just play Freebird, and the guy was like, "I'm not playing Freebird, dude." And I think I was getting close to getting kicked out, but I was just so drunk. But those are the kind of things I did when I was, living in Palmdale, and it was super. It was still fun, still doing things like that, and but the drinking still kept going. I still just kept drinking and kept partying. But I feel like it was more the hanging out with friends. It wasn't really the alcohol. It was just what you did. You had alcohol when you hung out with your buddies.
So it was more like I wasn't doing it because I was addicted. I was doing it because I enjoyed. I was basically addicted to the hanging out. I hated when the night would end. Um, but during that time, me and baby mama one were kind of growing apart, and she was going out doing her thing, and I was really trying to straighten my life out. But she was kind of doing her thing. She was going out partying, and
Uh, that marriage didn't last, didn't work. It was inevitable. Uh, I kind of knew it was going to happen. So that ended. I ended up after that moving. After a little while, moved in with my brother out in Lake LA again, and he ended up renting a house, and I ended up living there, and we hung out and drank. We didn't really party a lot after that. Here and there, we would hang out with people, and it wasn't really like much of a party scene. It was kind of dying down a little bit. That's when I met baby mama number two, and we ended up like moving out within a few weeks of knowing each other, and we just moved into an apartment. And but during that time, I honestly wasn't drinking a lot. I was drinking here and there, and like she didn't really care if I drank, so it wasn't like a huge deal. So, but I felt like times were pretty good, and we decided that she didn't have any kids, and I had the two, and she wanted a kid, and so we kind of decided to have a kid, and so we had Kayla. Within the next few years, things started to change. I felt like I was in a good mental state at that time, and things were starting to get better. Um, but a couple months after Kayla was born, my dad passed away, and that kind of hit me hard. I mean, of course, like it was so sudden, and it went from like he was coming over to see the new baby, and he was limping a little bit. He had a cane. I was like, "What's going on, man?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm having some back issues." Saw a chiropractor, and um, then from there it was like 2 months later, he's gone, and it really hit me hard. Like we didn't expect this to happen. It was crazy. We had no warning. It just kind of like gone, and it hit me hard. And then I want to say a couple years later, um, baby mama one decided that she wanted to get full custody of the kids. So then I had my kids, all the time. And next thing you know, I didn't have them anymore. And so that kind of hit me hard. So these couple things happened within a few years, and I started noticing my mental state started changing, and I felt like I was depressed more, and I felt like I was acting different, and to cover it up, I would drink, and so when I would drink, I'd feel happy, and then you know after that, if a couple years later, I ended up losing my job. It was like the best job I ever had, and so within a few years, I lost. My dad passed, and then I lost my kids, and then I lost my job, and I'm just like, all these things are happening. I noticed my mental state just declining and declining, on the way there. And I started drinking, more hard alcohol. And what I was doing was, so that, baby mama one didn't know that I was drinking. I, I would, have one bottle that I would, pour myself a cocktail here and there. But I had this one bottle, but I would hide bottles all around the house that I would drink. And, I'd go up to the store to get stuff for dinner, and I'd throw in a little fifth or a pint or something, and just like make myself a drink with those, and I'd hide it all so she only saw the one bottle that was just kind of sitting there, and I'd drink out of other bottles. So that was the trick that I learned, to have one bottle sitting there as a decoy, and then you buy other bottles and then kind of throw them away, so nobody sees them, right? But I had bottles hidden everywhere throughout the house. Probably had 5 or 6 bottles just hidden in different spots. I had different hiding spots, and I was getting drunk. Like, after she would go to sleep, I would stay up a couple hours and get drunk. And then when I lost my job, I was staying up super late and just getting really drunk. And that's where like my love of Captain and Coke kind of came from. Was I would stay up every night and just drink a couple of those and get wasted. And then she would go to work early, and I would get up and take care of the kids because I wasn't working, or take the kids. I think I was just taking Kayla to school, and um, that's kind of where everything was happening. But it was more like I felt like it started. Like I had always been a drinker, and I'd never stopped. But my really hard drinking started around then, and it started changing my mood and started changing the way I was getting very emotional, and not crying, but just like I'd get mad easy, and I had a pretty bad temper, and that really affected our marriage. I wasn't perfect, neither was she, and we ended up realizing that we just didn't love each other anymore. I felt like my drinking was a big problem, and I feel like that's kind of why she kind of stopped caring anymore. Like I didn't care. All I wanted to do was drink, and it was when I drink, I'd be an asshole. We ended up moving to Utah, and it just got worse there. The beer there was only like, well, beer here. I'm in Utah now. Um, the beer here was only like 3.2% or something like that. So like I couldn't drink beer because it wouldn't get me drunk. So I had to drink hard liquor. But I, started doing the same thing. Started hiding bottles all over the house, and um, then I just stopped hiding it. I was just drinking. I didn't care, and um, so it's just the drinking just kept going, and I felt like that affected everything, and we ended up splitting up, and so I didn't want to hold on to the relationship. I wanted to hold on to my family, because I did not want you know my younger two girls to have to go through what the older kids are going through, what I went through as a kid. Um, the first one was difficult, and it was difficult on the kids, and I just didn't want that again. But I mean, all in all, it was inevitable. Like we didn't love each other anymore. I mean, we were homies basically, and like we still are to this day. It was just we didn't have the romance there; it just wasn't there anymore. And so there was nothing to save. It was just like I just didn't want to do it again. So I got depressed because I just didn't want to do this again to my kids. And I was really just it hit me hard, because I was like, here we go again, Richard fucking everything up. But then my oldest daughter graduated high school, and she wanted to move to Utah with me. So I was like, I was stoked about that. And so, on her graduation, I went and picked her up and brought her to Utah. And I bring that up because, we lived together for a while. Then I had to move with my sister because we're kind of in transition. And I was trying to find another place. And, she came with me there. And then I ended up getting a little apartment, and June came with me there. And the reason I bring all this up is because when I moved there, I I was drinking heavily. I was drinking before I went to work. I worked like right across the street, and I would like come home for lunch and drink, and I just was getting wasted all the time. And June saw that. My oldest, she saw that, and she didn't say anything. There was times where I was just extremely drunk, and then I got a girlfriend who was also an alcoholic and also kind of mentally unstable, like I was at the time. And it was bad news. We used to just drink and fight and drink, and my oldest daughter, she saw all this, and she saw the deterioration. She saw what I was going through, and we ended up getting a fight about like rent money or something like that. It wasn't her, it was her boyfriend. He wasn't paying me rent money, and I was like, I'm not supporting someone else's kid. You can stay, you're my kid, but I'm not supporting someone else's kid. And so she ended up moving out, and that kind of, I lost her. I was like, I didn't talk to her for a few months, and all I did was drink. And then I wouldn't drink on days where I had my little girls, and I would just drink on days where they weren't there, which was 3 or 4 days a week. Um, and then baby mama decided that she wanted to move back to California, and I wasn't going to stop her, and she wanted to take the girls, and so I had a few months where now I didn't have my oldest daughter and I didn't have my little girls. I was by myself. I was alone, and I had this girlfriend that was crazy, and she was an alcoholic, and it was nuts, man. And so I just drank and drank and drank, and it was just hard stuff. It was never beer anymore. I gave up the beer. I was drinking Sailor Jerry, or when I was broke, I would go buy what was it called? It was like Barbarossa or some shit. And I remember one time, like I was bottom of the barrel. I was scraping change, and I bought like Admiral Nelson. I remember seeing my best friend, and he was like, I was trying to remember the name of it, and I was like, it was the cheapest like spice rum. He's like, don't tell me it was Admiral Nelson. I was like, yeah, dude, it was Admiral Nelson. I was drinking that shit. But then I started making some decent money again, and I was buying Sailor Jerry. Like I wasn't fucking with Captain Morgan anymore. I wasn't doing enough, and I was just getting blackout all the time, drinking the shit, right? And then there was a turning point. Um, I hadn't talked to my oldest daughter in a few months, and I missed her, and she was pissed off at me, and rightfully so. And then I got a text from her, and the text basically was super long, and in a nutshell, it said, "I want nothing to do with you. I don't want to talk to you ever again until you get sober." And that kind of hit me hard, right? And at first, I started drinking more. I was just like, I was depressed. And I was crying. I was just like, everybody hates me. I'm just a piece of shit. Like I might as well die, and I'll just drink myself to death. And but I started really thinking. I read it over and over again, and started realizing like, what has this drinking done for me? What has it done in my whole life? Like, what has this drinking done for me? It's held me back since I was a teenager. It's just held me back. Drinking alcohol has just held me back. It's never done anything for me. And I was really feeling sick at that time as well. Like I wasn't feeling well. I had really bad stomach issues. I still have stomach issues to this day because of it. And so, I was just always feeling horrible. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor basically, he took some blood, he did some tests. And when the stuff came back, he basically told me that I was pre-diabetic. I was, overweight, pre-diabetic. In a nutshell, I had he said, if you continue down this path, I give you about 5 more years at your age and with these tests. And I was like, holy shit, man. I'm not ready to die, I mean, maybe I keep saying that when I'm drunk, but so in that situation, you can go one of two ways. I decided that, well, at first I decided I was going to drink more because that was what I did. Um, and I went on this huge bender over the weekend. I called in sick on like Friday and just drank and blacked out, and then got up and drank some more and blacked out and got up and drank some more. And then I just woke up one day and was like, I woke up after these 3 days and I said, fuck this, I'm done. I'm done. Poured out the rest of the alcohol that I had, and I think I missed the next 2 days of work, and just like I had the shakes and I was sick, and I felt horrible. And it was the hardest thing I'd really ever gone through. But I said, I'm fucking done, man. I'm losing everything. I'm losing my entire life. Like this is stupid. What the fuck am I doing? And that was the turning point. That's when I decided, like, yeah, I'm done, man. Um, and since that day, since I poured all that alcohol down, I have not touched a drop of alcohol, not once. The closest I came was I drove up to the liquor store, and I was like, I think it was like maybe a week. I'd been, completely sober for a week, and I was like, fuck this. And I drove to the liquor store, bought a fifth of Barbarossa, I think it was called, spiced rum. It was like $7, and took it home, poured myself a drink, poured myself a rum and coke, which is mostly rum. Looked at it, smelled it, and then poured it in the sink and put the bottle in the sink. Put the neck into the garbage disposal hole and fucking walked away. And that was the last time. That was the last time I bought alcohol, for myself to drink, and I didn't touch it. Um, so yeah, I decided that was it, man. And I was feeling like shit, and my stomach was always hurting even after, and but I feel like once I decided to actually quit, I feel like things started changing. Like things started getting better in my life. Like mentally, I still was fucked up, but things started getting better. Like um, I started talking to my girlfriend. I had met her at a job, and I started talking to her, as more than a friend. And if I wasn't sober at that time, she never would have wanted to date me. She never would have wanted to get with me. And so, I met her, and she's been just the most amazing person in my life. And I feel like without her, I probably wouldn't have stayed sober. There was times where she was there for me when I was really losing my shit. And I honestly feel like I probably would have went back to drinking if it wasn't for her. So once I decided to make that change, like things just started falling into place, and things started happening for me. And with drinking, nothing ever seemed to go right. I felt like it would go right for a while, then it would be fucked up. And it didn't really have to do with drinking, but it just felt like it just always had to do with drinking. So once I quit, it just seems like everything's better. It's taken me a few years to kind of feel mentally better about life in general. And I still am mentally not good. Like I still get depressed. I still feel like shit sometimes mentally. Like I have breakdowns, but they're few and far between now. And I feel like things are just getting better and better. And it was the best thing I could ever do. And I don't have any problem with people drinking. Like if you party, like party, man, have fun. It's just when it becomes a problem in your life, when it becomes not only physically but mentally, and then your life starts getting fucked up, that's the time when you got to quit. That's the time when it's done. And that's what I did. And I literally feel better than I ever have. My stomach issues have kind of subsided. They're still there here and there, but I feel physically, mentally better than I've ever felt. And so it's the best thing I ever could have done is to finally do that. And I've had friends that didn't make it. I've had a few friends that aren't with us anymore, and it's because of alcohol. And I wish, I wish I could have been there for them more, and to share the story with people so that maybe they can do it too. And if any of you are having issues with alcohol and you feel like you need help, then hit me up, man. Like I'm here for anybody. I don't care what time it is. Like you need to talk about how I did this and what I went through, and if you need help, let me know, man. Like I'm here for you. I'm definitely here for you. I really leaned on a few people when I was getting sober, and without them I wouldn't have been able to do it. So you know hit me up. Um, but anyway, for fear of this going too deep and too long, giggity, I will end it now. So again, thank you for um for all the feedback and all the you guys pretty seems like you dug the first episode. So hopefully you dig this one a little more into the mind of Dick. Thanks again, guys, and I will talk to you soon. Peace.